Welcome to This Week in Hell. I'm Professor and historian Bond Ruggles with all of the things you're just dying to know. Quite literally this week. For This Week in Hell, we're going to talk about a little bit on the history of death and how it has changed in the United States. The history of death in the United States is really interesting because unlike Europe, which has been around a lot longer, and we see this, movement and practices from the 1700s and the Enlightenment, we don't really get that in the United States until the Civil War. And I know there's got to be a ton of you out there that are Civil War historians. It's the 19th century, so of course it's one of my areas, although I study weird stuff around it, like the history of death, right? And what was happening was these battles were so just beyond our imagination abhorrent that you couldn't send the bodies home. It was a person from Maine being killed in Virginia, or someone from Virginia being killed in Pennsylvania. Very difficult to take a non-automobile, non-airplane trip all that way to get your body or your body parts, unfortunately, back to your family and loved ones. And so a doctor developed a way of preserving the body, at the very least, long enough to get the body home, back to family, viewed, and then interred in the ground appropriately before any signs of decay began to set in. And none other than our assassinated president, Abraham Lincoln, was one of the first, and all of those who mourned him, to benefit from this new practice. And it did allow soldiers and, their parts to come home to their mothers and their wives and their sisters and their daughters when otherwise they would not be. Now, in the case of Abraham Lincoln, when he was assassinated, he had to make his journey home too, right? He wasn't from Washington, D.C. He was there on a job mission, and really was from Illinois. And so the doctor who invented the embalming did it for Abraham Lincoln, and one of his closest confidants and companions traveled with him on the 2-week train journey from D.C. back home to Illinois. Throughout that journey, this companion kept journal entries about the number of people that showed up to mourn him, hundreds of thousands in some cases, and all told for sure. They also noted how his body was looking. Did he still look like he was once a human? Did he clearly look dead at this point? And it takes quite a bit of time, about 10 days into the 2-week journey, before you start to hear that even with embalming, you see signs of decomposition. And really the worst that he had to say, even in that instance, was that by the time the journey was finished, President Lincoln was looking just a little green. Thank you so much for joining us this week on This Week in Hell. We'll hope to see you next time.